This is a troubling time for our nation. It has been for a long while, but it reached a new low on Friday with the firebombing of that suburban Melbourne synagogue. This arson attack struck at the heart of that Jewish Australian community. It was an attack that could have killed people, but thankfully didn't. But its message of fear, of intimidation, of imminent threat and of hatred was oh so clear. And the crime has now been classified a terrorist attack as federal and Victorian police investigate. But to understand the full implications of this for the country and for the Prime Minister, I want to go back and share some history. Let's start with what Anthony Albanese promised on election night.
My Labor team will work every day to bring Australians together, and I will lead a government worthy of the people of Australia. I want to seek our common purpose and promote unity and optimism, not fear and division.
Empty words, aren't they? Because all we have seen is weakness, and that weakness has delivered fear and division. We know weakness is provocative to evil actors, and so it's proven to be yet again. On October the 8th last year, a Muslim sheikh celebrated the slaughter of more than 1,200 innocent Israelis the day before. Yes, he celebrated their murder.
It's a day of courage!
And you'll remember the next night, people chanted, "Gas the Jews" or "Where's the Jews? Choose your poison," defiling the Opera House steps. Jewish people were warned away, our global landmark was handed over to the haters, and no one was arrested. And on this program, I've called this out from the get-go. The promoters of this bile ought to face the full force of our anti-terror laws. We're a tolerant nation, but we shouldn't tolerate this savage intolerance. Our politicians show weakness. Our police show weakness. Our schools, our universities, our public service, they all show weakness. If you only show weakness, you won't last. The extremists will have their way with you in the end. This will just increase the vulnerability of the Jewish communities in Australia. This is all almost 14 months ago, well over a year ago, and tragically it all fell on deaf ears. I was far from the only person making these calls. Jewish community leaders, politicians, other commentators, many people were pleading for action. But we saw far too little action, not even strong language from governments. And all this year, we've seen it getting predictably worse. Threats, chants, doxing, graffiti, cars burned, businesses attacked, and on and on. You see, the trouble is they spend so much time criticising Israel, warning Israel about its actions, that it just gives licence to the haters. Wong and Albanese need to understand there are values to uphold, lives to protect, and threats to be countered, threats to our civilisation. These challenges are much more important than politics. Albanese and Wong are kidding themselves if they think their weakness does not undermine Australia globally and increase the danger of more social division at home and lead to the risk of more anti-Semitism and more Islamist extremist terrorism. Anthony Albanese and the federal Labor government are culpable for what we are seeing. They've been weak. They've spent more time attacking Israel than they have condemning Hamas. Prime Minister, please show some leadership. It's not only your job, it's your responsibility. And you're letting the country down. The Prime Minister issued a statement, of course. Anthony Albanese condemned it, but what's he done? Over the past 13 months, what has he done to stamp out this rising tide of anti-Semitism? The answer is nothing. He's been feeble. He's been weak. Look, I've got to say, I've sent the Prime Minister personal messages on this as well. And yes, I've been like a broken record. And yes, we've all been going on about this for well over a year because it's so important and nothing has happened. It's gotten worse. And the reason I show you all this, it could go on for hours, all that sort of stuff that we've talked about over the past 14 months, is to just underline how many episodes there have been, how many warnings, how many pleas. Yet all we've seen is weasel words from Albanese and other Labor politicians. We've seen the federal government become increasingly critical of Israel and adopt weaker positions at the United Nations, moves that just distort the reality and amplify the hatred. The trend continued this month at the United Nations and on our streets. Australia has diminished its standing. It's abandoned an ally. It's broken with our most powerful ally in the United States. It's deserted again Jewish Australians, and it's given a boost to every Islamist extremist in the world. This is reckless and dangerous stuff. Yeah, they claim to be opposed to the Israeli government only, not Jews, yet they targeted a synagogue, leaving Jewish Australians holed up inside. Yeah, just terrible stuff. The whole river to the sea bile was rolled out again. And police just stood by and watched, even though today the New South Wales Police declared that this was an unauthorised protest. Yeah, that was just last week, all the way through weakness. So that on Thursday, last Thursday, on this program, former Federal Labor Minister Mike Kelly told me that the Prime Minister needed to show more strength to prevent worse outcomes.
The government is putting at risk our national security here and our social cohesion because it appears as if they're rewarding every new escalated act of violence out there by those activists who are committed to that course of action. And so every time that they're rewarded for those courses of action, they're just emboldened to take it further.
That's a former Labor minister, a Labor man, warning his own Prime Minister, his own Labor Prime Minister, to show some strength because otherwise you're emboldening the extremists. And then within hours of that prescient warning, the Adass Synagogue was firebombed.
He was one of two worshippers inside the building when it came under attack at 4 o'clock this morning. Firebombs were pelted through the glass, security cameras capturing the moment the blaze erupted. Within minutes, the synagogue was up in flames, taking more than 60 firefighters to control the fire.
This attack has prompted national outrage and a level of political engagement that's been missing for 14 months. The Prime Minister chaired a meeting of Cabinet's National Security Committee today and fronted the media afterwards with the heads of the Federal Police and ASIO.
Today I can also announce that we have established AFP Special Operation Avalite for anti-Semitism. This is in response to the attack last Friday morning that is now the third arson attack after the attack on Josh Burns' electorate office and the Sydney Woollahra car incident.
14 months after we saw that hatred on the Opera House steps, a task force. Albanese claims to have been on the case all along, passing laws against Nazi symbols and appointing an anti-Semitism envoy. But it's all empty words coming too late. The Prime Minister's been more critical of Israel than he has of the anti-Israel mobs, which is no surprise because he used to be among them, protesting with them back in the day. And even today, Albanese was insipid, preoccupied with process and focused on defending his own actions rather than our national values. Apparently, it was wrong to accuse him of playing tennis on Saturday morning at a time of national crisis because he played in the afternoon. Give us a break. The Prime Minister has offered more money for security at Jewish institutions, which is dealing with the symptom rather than the cause. Little wonder former Deputy Federal Liberal leader Josh Frydenberg had this to say.
Anthony Albanese has to take on some of the extremists in his party, some of the extremists in society, and he has to use his position as the first among equals in the parliament to effect real and lasting change. I'm not holding my breath because his record to date has been so poor.
I'll have that full interview with Josh Frydenberg later in the program, but let me make 2 points here to summarise. First, if we allow this sort of hatred, bigotry and violence to be perpetrated against one group of people in this country, then we're undermining the very fabric of this nation for all of us. It's shameful and intolerable. And second, if we've seen so little action, so little outrage and so little leadership from Anthony Albanese after 14 months of strife, warnings and pleas for help, then it's clear he'll never show leadership. It's clear he's not up to the job. And that means this will only get worse until there's change at the top.